In the grand hall filled with laughter on Christmas Eve, everyone fell silent as the single father named Ethan Cross walked toward the old piano. He only meant to play a gentle lullaby for his daughter to sleep. But the moment the melody rose, CEO Sophia
We need to
Bennett
address these discrepancies
stood
immediately. The
frozen.
projections are off by
It was the
15%,
very
and I think
song
this
her
report will
first love
explain
had
why.
written just for her, a secret no one else knew. Her hands trembled, her heart tearing open because the man who wrote that song had died 16 years ago. So, why could this stranger play it? The corporate tower's lobby had already been transformed into a winter wonderland by the time Ethan arrived that evening. White lights cascaded down marble pillars like frozen waterfalls, and the scent of pine and cinnamon filled every corner. Employees mingled in clusters, champagne glasses catching the glow of a massive tree near the executive elevators. Ethan moved through the crowd almost invisibly. His gray work shirt had faded from too many washes, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. Calloused hands still bore traces of grease from fixing a heating vent earlier that day. At 36, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that most people overlooked. They saw the janitor. They didn't see the artist whose fingers once danced across concert hall stages, whose name had briefly appeared in regional papers as a rising talent before everything fell apart. His daughter Lily clung to his hand. Her 7-year-old frame practically vibrated with excitement. Dark curls bounced as she tugged him toward the dessert table, brown eyes wide with wonder at the chocolate fountain. Ethan watched her with the kind of love that made his chest ache, fierce and protective, and tinged with guilt that he couldn't give her the childhood she deserved. No expensive dresses, no private schools, just a cramped apartment where the radiator clanked at night and the piano in the community center down the street where she sometimes heard him play when he thought no one was listening. 3 years had passed since Caroline died. 3 years since the cancer took her in that terrible hospital room while Lily slept in the chair beside her bed, too young to understand why Mommy wouldn't wake up. Ethan had promised his wife he'd keep music in their daughter's life, but some promises felt harder to keep than others when you were working double shifts just to make rent. Across the hall, Sophia Bennett stood on the mezzanine level, surveying her domain with the practiced poise of someone born to command rooms. At 34, she had transformed her father's struggling real estate firm into Bennett Capital Group, a juggernaut of commercial development that now owned 40% of the city's waterfront. Her honey blonde hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and the crimson dress she wore, a bold V-neck that demanded attention without apology, made her impossible to miss. But it was her eyes that truly arrested people. Ice blue and calculating, they seemed to measure every person, every angle, every potential weakness or opportunity. Most found her intimidating. Some called her ruthless. No one called her soft. Her assistant, Michelle Park, appeared at her elbow with a tablet. "The numbers look good for Q4. The Riverside acquisition closed this morning. Board's pleased." Sophia barely glanced at the screen. "They should be. We came in under budget and ahead of schedule." Michelle hesitated, then ventured into dangerous territory. "Boss, you've been working 18-hour days for 3 months. When was the last time you went on that date Brandon arranged?" Sophia's expression could have frozen windows. "I don't pay you to manage my personal life, Michelle. I pay you to manage my schedule." The younger woman retreated with a practiced grace that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd tested those boundaries. Sophia returned her attention to the crowd below, watching her employees laugh and drink and pretend they weren't terrified of her. Good fear kept people sharp, kept them from getting comfortable enough to make mistakes. Yet beneath the armor of her designer wardrobe and cutting boardroom reputation, Sophia carried a wound that had never fully healed. 16 years ago, when she was 18 and still believed in fairy tales, she had fallen in love with a boy named Ryan Mitchell. He was a piano prodigy, all wild dark hair and passionate eyes, the kind of talent that made you forget to breathe when he played. He had written her a song just for her. He called it Starlit Promise, and he played it for her one night under a sky full of stars at their summer music camp, whispering that it held everything he felt but couldn't say. 3 weeks later, Ryan died in a car accident on a rain-slicked highway. The song died with him, or so Sophia believed. She never heard it played again. She forbade herself from listening to music the way she once had, treating it instead as background noise, afraid that if she let herself feel too deeply, the grief would swallow her whole. Lily's bright voice cut through Sophia's thoughts. The child had somehow wandered away from her father and was now standing near the dessert table, reaching for a chocolate-covered strawberry that sat just beyond her grasp. As she stretched on tiptoes, her foot slipped on something wet. Champagne, probably spilled by a careless guest. She went down hard, her knee cracking against the marble floor. The sound was small but sharp, and immediately Lily's face crumpled. Blood seeped through her tights. Ethan was across the room in seconds, dropping to his knees beside his daughter. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. He always carried one for moments like this, and pressed it gently to her scraped knee. His voice was low and soothing, the kind of voice that could calm storms. "Hey, sweetheart, Daddy's got you. You're okay. Just a little scrape. We'll fix it." Lily's sobs quieted to hiccups as he held her, his broad hand cradling the back of her head. But before Ethan could lift her to carry her to the restroom to properly clean the wound, a man's voice sliced through the moment. "Can you control your child?" Brandon Hayes strode over, his tailored navy suit immaculate, his jaw tight with irritation. Brandon was Sophia's fiancé, or rather the man her father had chosen for her to marry in 6 weeks. He was handsome in a catalog model way, with perfectly styled chestnut hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He worked in private equity and spoke frequently about optimizing assets and maximizing shareholder value in a tone that made it clear he viewed most things, including people, as items on a spreadsheet. "This is a corporate event, not a daycare." Brandon gestured at the small smear of blood on the floor. "If you can't afford a babysitter, maybe you shouldn't have brought her." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "She's 7. She slipped. It was an accident. An accident that wouldn't have happened if you knew your place." Brandon's eyes raked over Ethan's work clothes with undisguised contempt. "Your maintenance. There's a staff entrance for a reason." Lily's bottom lip trembled, and something in Ethan's chest cracked. He opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut in first. Sophia descended the mezzanine stairs with deliberate grace, each step measured and purposeful. When she reached them, her ice-blue eyes fixed on Brandon with a coldness that could frost windows. "You don't have the authority to speak to my employees that way." Her tone was quiet, but allowed no room for negotiation. "Apologize." The room had gone silent, everyone watching. Brandon's face flushed. "Sophia, I was just—" "Apologize now." Brandon's lips pressed into a thin line, but he managed a clipped "sorry" directed more at the floor than at Ethan or Lily. Sophia turned to Ethan then, and for just a moment her expression softened. She saw the way he held his daughter, the care in his touch, the protective fury barely restrained in his shoulders. She saw something that felt dangerously close to recognition, though she couldn't name why. "In my building, we don't measure people's worth by their job title." Her voice carried across the lobby. "We measure them by their character. And right now, yours is seriously lacking." She looked back at Ethan. "Take care of your daughter. First aid kit is in the executive lounge, 5th floor. Take the private elevator." She gestured toward the brass doors behind her desk. Ethan nodded, his throat too tight for words, and carried Lily away. Brandon stood there for a moment, jaw working, before stalking off toward the bar. Sophia watched the father and daughter disappear into the elevator. Something about the scene unsettled her. Not the confrontation with Brandon, which was routine, but the way Ethan had held Lily, gentle but unbreakable, the kind of love that would burn down the world to keep a child safe. It reminded her of something, someone from a lifetime ago, a boy with dark eyes who had looked at her the same way, as if she were worth protecting from every hurt the universe could devise. She shook her head and returned to the mezzanine, but the feeling lingered like perfume in an empty room. By the time Ethan and Lily returned an hour later, Lily's knee properly bandaged and her spirits restored by the hot chocolate and cookies a kind executive assistant named Michelle had provided. The party had grown louder. Someone had opened the piano, a vintage Steinway that usually sat covered and silent in the corner, more decorative than functional. A few employees had gathered around it, laughing and requesting songs from a tipsy accountant who knew 3 chords and played them with more enthusiasm than skill. Lily tugged Ethan toward the instrument. "Daddy, can you play, please? Just one song so I can sleep." Ethan hesitated. He hadn't played publicly in years. The accident had shattered more than his hand. It had broken something in his soul, made him afraid to touch the keys in front of anyone who might judge, who might remember what he used to be and see only what he'd become. But Lily's eyes were so hopeful, and it was Christmas Eve, and she'd been so brave about her scraped knee. How could he say no? He sat down at the piano, and the crowd quieted, curiosity replacing their chatter. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, trembling slightly. The scars across his right palm caught the light. Spiderweb patterns where surgical steel had tried and failed to completely restore what falling equipment had crushed 12 years ago. The memories came unbidden. Cleveland, opening night of what should have been his big break. The stage rigging groaning above, a young cellist who didn't hear the metal fatigue, didn't see death swinging down toward her head. Ethan shoving her aside, his hand catching in the falling truss, bones pulverizing under half a ton of equipment that some cost-cutting executive had approved despite safety violations. He'd saved her life and destroyed his own in the same instant. 3 surgeries later, the doctor delivered the verdict with clinical detachment. "You'll never play professionally again. The nerve damage is too extensive. I'm sorry." But Lily was waiting, and the piano was here. And sometimes you had to be brave, even when everything inside you screamed to run. Ethan began to play. The melody that filled the hall was unlike anything most of them had ever heard. It was gentle at first, like rain on glass. Each note placed with such precision and care that it felt less like music and more like a conversation whispered in the dark. Then it grew, swelling into something achingly beautiful, a cascade of sound that spoke of longing and loss, and a love so deep it had no words. Ethan's eyes closed as he played, his damaged hand, scarred from where the stage rigging had crushed it 12 years ago, moved with a grace that defied its injury. He played from memory, from the marrow of his bones. Every note was a piece of his heart laid bare on the marble floor. The song was Starlit Promise, though no one in the room except Ethan knew its name. He had written it 16 years ago for a girl who never knew he existed. Completing what another boy had started, poured everything he felt into notes because words had always failed him. Given it away to someone who could deliver it to her because that's what you did when you loved someone from the shadows. You gave them pieces of yourself and never asked for credit. Sophia had been preparing to leave when the music reached her. She froze mid-step, her hand gripping the brass railing so hard her knuckles turned white. The melody wrapped around her like a ghost, pulling her back through 16 years to a summer night when the stars seemed close enough to touch, and a boy with dark eyes had played this exact song for her. She was 18 again, sitting on that dock at music camp, Ryan beside her with his wild confidence and electric smile, his fingers dancing over portable keyboard keys, his voice soft with emotion. I'm calling it Starlit Promise. It holds everything I feel but can't say, everything I want to give you but don't have words for. She'd cried then, happy tears, and kissed him under those impossible stars. 3 weeks later, police officers stood on her parents' doorstep with the worst news a person could receive. Miss Bennett, there's been an accident. Ryan Mitchell was pronounced dead at the scene. We're so sorry for your loss. The song had become her lifeline in the years that followed. The last piece of Ryan she had left. She'd forbidden herself from seeking out recordings. There were none, anyway, as far as she knew, but she played it in her head during board meetings when her father demanded she be ruthless. Hummed it under her breath in empty apartments when the loneliness threatened to consume her. Let it remind her that once, briefly, she had been loved for who she was rather than what she could provide. But now, someone else was playing it. Every note, every pause, every aching phrase exactly as Ryan had played it that night. Sophia's vision blurred, her chest constricted, each breath a labor. Around her, guests murmured appreciation, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath her feet had just shattered. How? How could this stranger, this janitor, know Ryan's song? She descended the stairs on unsteady legs, drawn to the piano as if magnetized. Ethan finished the song and opened his eyes to find the CEO standing 3 feet away, her face pale, her blue eyes swimming with unshed tears. Where did you learn that? Her voice came out raw, barely above a whisper. Ethan stood slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd known this moment might come someday, had dreaded it and longed for it in equal measure. It's just an old melody, something I picked up years ago. Don't lie to me. Sophia's voice sharpened, desperation creeping into her tone. That song was written for me by someone who died 16 years ago. No one else knew it. No one could have known it. She stepped closer, searching his face for answers he wasn't ready to give. Who are you? Before Ethan could respond, Lily appeared at his side, sleepy and smiling. That was beautiful, Daddy. Can we go home now? Sophia's gaze dropped to the child, then back to Ethan. She saw the fear in his eyes, the way he instinctively moved to shield his daughter from her intensity. She forced herself to breathe, to step back, to remember where she was and who was watching. But as Ethan gathered Lily's coat and hurried toward the exit, Sophia stood rooted to the spot, the melody still echoing in her skull, like a hymn or a curse. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ryan's face, heard his voice promising her forever in notes instead of words. But now, another image kept intruding. The janitor's scarred hands moving across the keys, the sorrow etched into the lines around his eyes, the way he'd held his daughter like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting. Who was he? And how had he stolen a piece of her past? The next morning, Sophia arrived at the office 2 hours early, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. She pulled Ethan Cross's employee file and spread it across her desk. The information was sparse, almost deliberately so. Hired 3 years ago as maintenance staff. No college degree listed. Previous employment at a warehouse, a grocery store. Odd jobs. Emergency contact listed as Lily Cross, age 7. Daughter. No mention of a wife or partner currently. The file said nothing about music, nothing about talent, nothing that explained how a man working night shifts, fixing toilets, and changing light bulbs could play like that. Sophia picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in over a decade. The line rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. Sophia. Is that really you? Robert Hayes had been Ryan's mentor at the conservatory, the professor who'd recognized genius in a 17-year-old with more passion than discipline. His voice carried the same warmth she remembered, though age had roughened the edges. I need to see you. Sophia kept her tone professional, but something in her voice must have betrayed the urgency. Today. It's about Ryan. There was a long pause on the other end. I'll come to your office. Give me 4 hours. He arrived that evening, a lean man in his late 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes obscured by wire-rimmed glasses. Sophia hadn't spoken to Dr. Hayes since the funeral, couldn't bear to be around anyone who reminded her of what she'd lost. But when she called, he came without question. She played him a recording she'd found online. Someone had filmed Ethan playing last night on their phone and posted it to a private group for Bennett Capital employees. The video quality was poor, the audio tinny, but the melody came through clear enough. Dr. Hayes listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When the video ended, he removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes with thumb and forefinger. That's remarkable. Sophia leaned forward. Is it Starlit Promise, Ryan's song? Dr. Hayes hesitated, and in that hesitation, Sophia saw the weight of secrets kept too long. It's the same melody. Yes. But the professor set his glasses on her desk with careful precision. Sophia, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 16 years ago, but I didn't because I thought it would hurt you more than help. Sophia's pulse quickened. Ryan didn't finish that song. The words landed like a physical blow. He wrote the opening, the first 8 bars, and he was brilliant. He always was, but he got stuck. Couldn't figure out where to take it. He was frustrated, kept scrapping versions, starting over. I watched him torture himself over it for 2 weeks. Hayes paused, choosing his words carefully. There was another student at camp that summer. Quiet kid, talented, but overlooked from a poor family. Ryan asked him for help. Sophia's hands gripped the edge of her desk. The other student took Ryan's opening and completed it, turned those 8 bars into something extraordinary. But then Ryan died and the song became his legacy. I never corrected the record because he trailed off, looking older than his years, because I thought it would dishonor his memory. Ryan was my star pupil. Admitting he hadn't finished his masterpiece felt like diminishing him somehow. Who was the other student? I don't remember his name. It's been so long and I taught hundreds of kids over those years. He didn't fight for credit. When Ryan died, he just disappeared, didn't return to camp the following summer. I assumed he'd given up music entirely. Sophia felt the room tilt. Ethan Cross, the man who played last night. Could it have been him under... Hayes looked at the frozen frame of the video on her laptop screen. Ethan's face illuminated by the piano's reading light, eyes closed in something that looked like prayer or penance. I don't know. Maybe. The face doesn't trigger any memories, but it's been 16 years. People change. He closed the laptop gently. But there's only one way to find out. Ask him. Sophia tried. She called down to the maintenance department as soon as Dr. Hayes left. Is Ethan Cross working tonight? The supervisor sounded confused. No, ma'am. He called in sick this morning, first time in 3 years. What about tomorrow? He requested personal days through the end of the week. Something cold settled in Sophia's stomach. I need his address. She sent James Carter, her head of security, a former Marine with kind eyes and discretion she trusted, to check on Ethan. James returned an hour later with news that made her blood run cold. Boss, I went to the address on file. Apartment building on the east side. Pretty rough neighborhood. The landlord says Cross and his daughter moved out 3 days ago. Paid rent through the end of the month, but left no forwarding address. Wouldn't say where they were going. Sophia's hand trembled as she reached for her phone. 3 days ago? That was before the party, before she'd confronted him. He'd already been planning to disappear. Did anyone see them leave? Neighbor across the hall said they left early morning with just a couple suitcases. The little girl was crying. Cross told her they were going on an adventure, but the neighbor said he looked scared. Sophia felt panic claw at her chest. She'd driven him away. Her questions, her intensity, her desperate need for answers had frightened him off. But why? What was he hiding? Or more accurately, what was he protecting? She spent the next 2 weeks consumed by the search, hired a private investigator who found nothing. Ethan Cross seemed to have vanished completely, as if he'd never existed at all. No credit card charges, no cell phone pings, no trace of him or Lily anywhere in the city. The absence gnawed at her, not just because of the unanswered questions about the song, though those haunted her dreams, but because she'd seen something in his eyes that night, a recognition that went deeper than strangers meeting by chance. He'd looked at her like he knew her, really knew her, in a way that most people never could, and then he'd run. Meanwhile, the rest of her carefully constructed life began to fracture. Brandon grew increasingly insistent about wedding plans, showing up at her office with seating charts and menu tastings she had no interest in. The merger between Bennett Capital and his investment firm was scheduled to close in mid-February, 2 weeks after their wedding. Her father called daily from his retirement in Palm Springs to ensure she wasn't jeopardizing the deal with cold feet. But Sophia couldn't focus on any of it. Her mind kept returning to that moment when Ethan's fingers touched the piano keys and 16 years collapsed into nothing. To the way he'd held his daughter with such fierce gentleness, to the sorrow that seemed to permeate his very bones. The cruelest thing about losing someone isn't that they're gone. It's discovering you never really knew them at all. She whispered the words to herself late one night, standing at her penthouse window overlooking the city. Ryan had secrets she never knew, a collaboration he never mentioned, a song that wasn't entirely his own. And now this stranger carried the truth of it in his scarred hands and wouldn't stay still long enough for her to understand. 2 weeks after Ethan disappeared, on a night when snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the city in white silence, Sophia was about to leave the office when she heard it again. Piano music drifting up from the lobby. Faint, haunting, unmistakable. She didn't call for the elevator, ran down the stairs instead, heels clicking on marble, breath coming too fast, afraid that if she moved too slowly, he would vanish again like smoke. The lobby was empty except for a single figure seated at the piano. Ethan. His back was to her, shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible weight. He played Starlit Promise again, but this time it sounded different. Sadder, more resigned, like a man saying goodbye to something he'd loved too long from too far away. "You came back." Her voice echoed in the empty space. Ethan's hand stilled on the keys. He didn't turn around. "I shouldn't have run." The words came out quiet, almost too soft to hear. "Lily asked me why we left. I couldn't give her a good answer. She liked it here. Liked the cookies Michelle gave her. Liked watching the lights. Liked that nice lady CEO who let us use the fancy elevator." He finally turned and Sophia saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "I owed you the truth, even if you hate me for it." Sophia moved closer, her footsteps careful on the marble. "I could never hate you for playing beautifully, but I need to understand. That song, Starlit Promise, Ryan Mitchell was supposed to have written it for me before he died, but Dr. Hayes told me Ryan didn't finish it. Someone else did." She stopped directly behind him. "Was it you?" Ethan stood slowly, his movements deliberate. Up close, Sophia could see the silver threaded through his light brown hair, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too much worry. But his eyes, gray-green and achingly honest, held hers without flinching. "Yes, it was me." Sophia's knees nearly buckled. She gripped the edge of the piano to steady herself, her carefully maintained control finally crumbling. "Why? Why would you do that? Why would you let him take credit?" "Because he loved you," And I was nobody. Ethan stepped back from the piano, creating distance as if the instrument itself might burn him. Sophia remained frozen, processing the impossible truth that the man standing before her had written the song that became her lifeline through grief. Just some kid who played because he had to, not because he was destined for greatness like Ryan. Ethan's voice carried the weight of 16 years of silence. I was at that music camp on a scholarship I could barely afford. My dad died when I was 15. He was a mechanic, died under a car when the jack failed. My mom cleaned houses. My little sister needed braces we couldn't pay for. He turned toward the windows, unable to meet her eyes. I worked nights washing dishes at a diner just to afford bus fare to camp and back. 52 hours a week scrubbing pots and mopping floors so I could spend my days pretending I belonged with kids whose parents wrote checks without blinking. Sophia's throat constricted, but she stayed silent, letting him unravel. I played piano because it was the only time I felt like I mattered. Like I was more than just some poor kid from the wrong side of town who smelled like dish soap and couldn't afford new shoes. And then I saw you. The confession hung between them like a physical thing. You probably don't remember. Why would you? I was invisible. But I watched you laugh with Ryan. Watched the way your eyes lit up when he played. And I thought, Ethan's laugh came out bitter. That's what love looks like. That's what it means to matter to someone. And I wanted to give you something, even if you never knew it came from me. Sophia found her voice, though it emerged hoarse. So, you wrote a love song for another man to give to me? I wrote a love song for you. Ethan turned back, and the raw honesty in his face made her chest ache. Ryan just delivered it. He knew I had feelings I couldn't express. He wasn't cruel about it. He offered to tell you the truth, but I said no. I told him you were meant for someone like him. Someone brilliant and confident and whole. Not someone like me who'd never be anything more than the guy washing dishes in the back. The lobby felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. Sophia gripped the piano harder, needing the solid wood beneath her palms to anchor her to reality. And then he died. And then he died. Ethan echoed, his voice breaking on the words. And I let the song be his legacy because it made you happy, because it gave you something to hold on to. And I went home and tried to forget I'd ever been anyone other than what I am now. Sophia's tears came then, hot and unchecked. The man she'd mourned for 16 years hadn't written the song that saved her. A stranger had. A boy who loved her from the shadows and gave away his heart without ever expecting anything in return. The revelation shattered something fundamental in her understanding of her own history. What happened to you? The question came out desperate. Dr. Hayes said, you were talented. Why are you fixing pipes instead of playing concert halls? Ethan held up his right hand, turning it so she could see the scars that webbed across his palm and up his wrist. The damaged tissue caught the light, creating shadows in the valleys where surgical steel had tried and failed to completely restore what had been destroyed. 3 years after that summer, I signed a contract with a performance company. His jaw clenched. Bennett Productions, your father's company. It was supposed to be my big break. Regional concert series, 20 cities. My name on posters for the first time in my life. Sophia felt ice crawl up her spine. Opening night, Cleveland. I got there early for rehearsal. Stage crew was setting up rigging for lights. I was walking past when I heard this crack. Metal fatigue. The whole truss started to fall. Ethan's eyes went distant, seeing something Sophia couldn't. There was a cellist right under it. Young woman, maybe 19. Juilliard student. She didn't see it coming. Didn't hear the metal groaning. She was tuning her instrument with her back to the stage. I shoved her out of the way. Got my hand caught in the rigging when it came down. Half a ton of equipment. His voice went flat, emotionless, the way trauma victims speak when the pain is too large to process. They said later, the bones were pulverized like crushing an egg in your fist. 3 surgeries couldn't fix it completely. Sophia's vision blurred. Her father's company, her family's negligence, had destroyed this man's future. The investigation concluded it was cost-cutting gone wrong. Someone approved substandard equipment to improve profit margins. Ethan finally met her eyes. Your father's company settled quietly with everyone involved. I got enough to cover medical bills, barely. $75,000. Medical bills were $68,000. The surgeries, the physical therapy, the specialist consultations that went nowhere. Contract was terminated 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital. How much was the contract worth? $300,000 for the tour, plus recording opportunities if the series went well. Potential endorsements. Dr. Hayes said I could have had a real career. Nothing stratospheric, but solid, respectable, enough to support a family and do what I loved. Sophia felt bile rise in her throat. And my father gave you $75,000. Ethan's smile held no warmth. So I learned to fix the things that break. Seemed fitting, don't you think? The broken pianist fixing broken pipes. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to voice. Sophia's entire empire had been built on the foundation of her father's ruthlessness. The cost-cutting, the corners cut, the human collateral deemed acceptable in pursuit of profit. She'd known William Bennett was hard, had watched him crush competitors without mercy. But this was different. This was personal in a way that made her complicit by association. Did you know? Ethan asked quietly. When you took this job here, did you know who I was? Not at first. I needed work. Any work. After the accident, no one would hire me for music. I was damaged goods, so I learned plumbing, electrical, HVAC repair, took whatever jobs I could find. The warehouse work paid nothing. The grocery store was barely better. But then Caroline got sick and I needed health insurance. Real insurance, not the catastrophic-only plans that covered nothing. He paused and Sophia saw the grief flicker across his face. My wife, Lily's mother, she was a nurse. We met 3 years after the accident. She knew my story, married me anyway. Told me she didn't care that I'd never be a famous pianist. Said she loved the man I was, not the man I could have been. When the cancer came, I would have done anything for treatment that worked. Sold my soul if someone offered to buy it. But all I had were my hands and my willingness to work. So I worked 3 jobs for 2 years while she went through chemo and radiation and experimental treatments that insurance barely covered. Sophia's chest felt like it was caving in. She died anyway. In our apartment, in our bed, with Lily asleep in the chair beside her because our girl wouldn't leave her mother's side. Caroline made me promise to keep music in Lily's life, to not let my bitterness about the accident poison our daughter's chance to love what I'd lost. Ethan's voice cracked. So when I saw the job posting for Bennett Capital, I applied. Maintenance technician, good pay, excellent benefits, health insurance that actually covered things. I didn't make the connection to Bennett Productions at first. Different subsidiary, different name on the paperwork. But then I got here and saw your name on the directory, Sophia Bennett. And I wondered if you were related to William Bennett, the man who owned the company that destroyed me. And then I saw you, and I knew. Why did you stay? Because I'm a coward. Because seeing you from a distance was better than not seeing you at all. Because maybe in some small way fixing things in your building could make up for the fact that I couldn't fix what really mattered. His honesty was brutal, self-lacerating. And because I needed the job. Because Lily needed stability and health care and a father who could put food on the table even if he couldn't give her anything else. Sophia moved without thinking, closing the distance between them. Her hand reached for his damaged one, lifting it gently. The scars felt rough under her fingertips, raised tissue that had healed badly despite expensive surgeries. "I'm sorry." The words felt pathetically inadequate. "I'm so sorry for what my father did to you." "You didn't do it." "I benefited from it." Her voice turned sharp with self-recrimination. "This building, this company, everything I've built, it's all standing on a foundation of people like you. People my father crushed and paid off and forgot about. I always told myself I was different from him, that I ran things better, more ethically, but I never looked, never asked about the bodies buried in the basement." Ethan pulled his hand back gently. "You're not responsible for your father's sins." "Aren't I? I took over his company, expanded it, made it more profitable, all while benefiting from the money he made destroying lives." Sophia's anger wasn't directed at him, but at herself, at the willful blindness she'd maintained for years. "How many others are there? How many people did Bennett Productions hurt before it was folded into the larger company?" "I don't know." Ethan's voice softened. "But Sophia, whatever your father did, you are not him. The way you handled Lily tonight, the way you stood up to Brandon, the way you're standing here now, letting your heart break over something you didn't cause, that's not him. That's you." The kindness in his words undid her. Sophia's carefully maintained composure finally shattered, and she sank onto the piano bench, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd held back for 2 weeks. For 16 years, if she was honest. All the grief and guilt and loneliness she'd armored herself against came pouring out in waves. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before sitting beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't offer platitudes, just sat there in solidarity while she fell apart. When the worst of it passed, Sophia wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "I need to know." Her voice came out wrecked. "If I asked you to give me a chance, to let me know you, really know you, would you be brave enough to say yes? Even though I come with all this baggage, even though my father destroyed you, even though the world will call you a gold digger and me a fool." Ethan's eyes shone with something that looked like hope and terror in equal measure. "I wrote you a love song 16 years ago. I think I can manage a little courage now." Sophia laughed, the sound breaking through tears. "Good, because I'm terrified, and I could use someone who knows what it's like to start over." The weeks that followed were not easy. Sophia couldn't simply erase 16 years of emotional walls overnight, and Ethan carried his own weariness like a second skin. But they began meeting in the evenings after the building emptied. Careful conversations that slowly built trust. Ethan told her about Caroline, the high school sweetheart who saw past his damage, who worked double shifts at the hospital while he recovered from his 3rd surgery, who never once made him feel less than whole. "Lily has her smile, gets the same little crinkle by her eyes when she laughs. Sometimes I look at our daughter and it's like Caroline never left." Sophia learned about Lily's birth during a blizzard, Ethan delivering his own daughter in their bathroom because the ambulance couldn't reach them in time. About Caroline's diagnosis 2 years later, stage 3 breast cancer, aggressive, unforgiving. About the medical debt that buried them despite insurance, the bankruptcy that followed, the desperate scramble for any work that offered benefits. She was in so much pain at the end. Ethan's voice went quiet. But she wouldn't take the morphine because she wanted to be lucid for Lily. Wanted to read her bedtime stories and help with homework and pretend everything was normal for as long as possible. The last thing she said to me was, "Take care of our girl." Like I needed to be told, like there was anything I wouldn't do for Lily. In return, Sophia offered pieces of herself she'd locked away. Her mother's death when she was 12, the aneurysm that took her without warning, William's transformation afterward from stern father to tyrant, demanding perfection and punishing anything less. The way he'd groomed her to take over the company, molding her into a weapon he could wield against competitors. He never hit me, never had to, just had this way of looking at you that made you feel like you disappointed him at a cellular level. Sophia stared out at the city lights. After Ryan died, I threw myself into business school, got my MBA at 23, joined Bennett Capital at 24. William said grief was weakness, and I believed him. Thought if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, maybe I'd earn the love he withheld. Took me until my 30s to realize he wasn't capable of it. Brandon was his choice too. Brandon was the next logical acquisition. Sophia's laugh carried no humor. Private equity manager with the right connections, the right pedigree. Father approved the match before Brandon even proposed. Said the merger between our companies would position us for expansion into overseas markets. I said yes because I didn't have a reason to say no. Didn't love him, but I didn't love anyone. Seemed like as good a reason to marry as any. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Sophia met Ethan's eyes across the piano. You spent 16 years in love with someone who didn't know you existed. I spent 16 years frozen at 18, mourning a boy who never finished the song I thought defined our relationship. We're both pretty good at sad. But Ethan smiled, and it transformed his whole face. The difference is we get to write the ending now. Lily complicated things in the best possible way. Sophia arranged for the girl to attend the building's employee daycare, a benefit most maintenance staff couldn't afford. But Sophia quietly adjusted the subsidy structure to make it accessible. Ethan protested until Sophia pointed out that Lily needed socialization with other children, and he couldn't exactly bring her on maintenance calls. The girl took to Sophia with a directness that was both disarming and terrifying. Lily had no filter, no concept of appropriate boundaries between a 7-year-old and a CEO. She showed up at Sophia's office unannounced to show her drawings, asked blunt questions about why Sophia wore such uncomfortable-looking shoes, requested stories about what it was like to be in charge of a whole building. "Are you my daddy's friend?" Lily asked one evening when Ethan was running late picking her up from daycare. Sophia, who'd been reviewing acquisition documents, looked up to find the girl studying her with unsettling intensity. "I think so. I hope so." "Good, because he needs more friends. He's always alone except for me." Lily spoke with the matter-of-fact wisdom of children who've seen too much. "Mommy used to say he needed people, but after she died, he stopped talking to everyone. Just works and takes care of me and plays piano when he thinks I'm asleep." The observation pierced Sophia's chest. "Your dad loves you very much." "I know. But sometimes I worry about what happens when I'm grown up. Who will take care of him when I'm not there?" Lily's brown eyes, so like her mother's according to Ethan, held genuine concern. "He's sad a lot, tries to hide it, but I can tell." Sophia set down her pen, giving the girl her full attention. "What makes you think he's sad?" "The music. When he plays piano at the community center late at night, it sounds different than when he plays for me. Heavier, like he's trying to tell someone something but doesn't have the words." Lily climbed into the chair across from Sophia's desk. "But when you came to the Christmas party and after, when we came back, his music sounded lighter, like maybe he found the words finally." The girl's perception was devastating in its accuracy. Sophia felt exposed, as if a child had seen through 16 years of carefully constructed defenses to the lonely woman beneath. "I'm glad the music sounds lighter." "Me too," Lily grinned, revealing a gap where she'd lost a tooth the week before. "Are you going to marry my daddy?" Sophia choked on nothing. "What?" "That's what happens in stories. The princess meets the prince, they fall in love, they get married. You're kind of like a princess except with a building instead of a castle. And daddy's like a prince who got cursed but is secretly good at music." "I don't think real life works like stories, sweetheart." "Why not?" Lily's logic was irrefutable in its simplicity. Stories are just things that happen to people. And you're people, so why can't you have a story? Ethan arrived then, saving Sophia from having to explain the complicated adult reasons why fairy tales didn't translate to reality. But the question lingered long after they left, echoing in her empty office. By late January, Sophia's walls were crumbling. She found herself manufacturing excuses to check on maintenance issues personally, running into Ethan in stairwells and utility closets with a frequency that fooled no one. Michelle watched with knowing eyes but said nothing. James Carter, the security chief, started scheduling his rounds to avoid interrupting their evening conversations. The transformation didn't escape notice from those less sympathetic to workplace romance between unequal parties. Brandon arrived at her office unannounced one Tuesday afternoon, his expression harder than she'd seen it before. "We need to talk about the wedding." Sophia didn't look up from her computer. "Not now, Brandon. I'm in the middle of the Riverside contracts." "It's been 4 weeks since you've answered any of my planning emails. The caterer needs final numbers. The venue needs a deposit. My mother's been calling your assistant because you won't return her calls." His voice rose with each sentence. "Are you even planning to show up, or should I start canceling things?" Sophia finally met his eyes, recognizing the desperation beneath his anger. "Do you love me, Brandon? Really love me? Not the merger, not the business opportunity. Me?" The question caught him off guard. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Do you love me? Brandon's jaw worked silently for a long moment. "I care about you. I respect you. I think we make a good partnership. That's more than most marriages have. But you don't love me. Love is for children and poets. We're adults building empires." Brandon leaned forward, palms on her desk. "What we have is better than love. It's strategic, sustainable, mutually beneficial." Sophia thought about Ethan's scarred hands on piano keys, playing a song he'd written as a teenager for a girl he'd never spoken to. Thought about the way he held Lily like she was the entire world. Thought about Caroline dying in their apartment while her husband worked 3 jobs to afford treatments that didn't work. "You're right. Love is for children and poets." Her voice came out colder than she intended. "And apparently for janitors who give away their hearts without expecting anything in return. But not for people like us." Brandon's expression shifted to calculation. "This is about him, isn't it? The maintenance worker who played piano at the Christmas party. I've seen you talking to him. He has a name. Ethan Cross." "I don't care what his name is." Brandon's voice took on an edge Sophia had never heard before. "I care that you're jeopardizing everything we've built because of some misguided attraction to the help. Do you have any idea what the board will say? What investors will think?" "The board reports to me, and investors care about returns, not my personal life. Your personal life becomes their business when it affects company stability." Brandon pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and handed it to her. "Especially when there are financial irregularities that might concern them." Sophia stared at the spreadsheet displayed on the screen. Wire transfers from Bennett Capital accounts to Hayes Investment Partners. Dates and amounts that didn't match any merger documents she'd signed. "What is this?" "Insurance." Brandon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "In case you get any ideas about calling off the wedding. Those transfers could look like embezzlement if someone wanted to spin them that way, or they could look like standard merger preparation. Depends on who's controlling the narrative. This is blackmail. This is business. The wedding happens in 2 weeks. The merger closes. We all walk away winners." He took his phone back. "Or things get messy and everyone loses. Your choice, Sophia." After he left, Sophia sat in frozen silence. Then she called Michelle. "I need you to pull every financial document related to the Hayes Investment Partners merger. Every wire transfer, every approval, every email. and I need you to do it quietly. Don't tell anyone what you're looking for." Michelle's expression shifted from curiosity to understanding. "How far back?" 18 months, since negotiations started. The assistant left without questions, returning 3 hours later with a flash drive and a grim expression. "Boss, you need to see this." They spread the documents across Sophia's conference table. What Michelle had found went beyond simple irregularities. Brandon had been systematically siphoning funds from his own firm for over a year, covering the theft with false projections and inflated asset valuations. The merger wasn't about creating a powerhouse. It was about giving Brandon access to Bennett Capital's accounts to hide the $42 million he'd stolen from his investors. The wedding wasn't a partnership. It was a bailout. Sophia felt sick. How did I not see this? He's good at hiding things. Michelle pointed to another set of documents. These shell companies in the Caymans, the consulting fees that don't correspond to any actual services. He's been planning this for at least 2 years, waiting for the right opportunity. The right patsy, you mean? Sophia's anger crystallized into cold fury. He chose me because he knew my father would push for the merger. Knew I'd be so focused on business terms that I wouldn't look at his books closely enough. What are you going to do? Sophia looked at the evidence of Brandon's fraud, at the carefully constructed scheme that would have destroyed Bennett Capital's reputation and her own career. Thought about how close she'd come to walking into his trap, all because she'd been too frozen to feel anything strongly enough to question it. I'm going to end this tonight. That evening, Sophia called Ethan. Don't come to the building tonight and keep Lily close. His voice carried immediate concern. What's wrong? Everything's about to get very complicated, and I need you both safe until it's over. She hung up before he could argue, then made another call. William, it's Sophia. We need to talk about Brandon. Tomorrow morning, 7:00 a.m., your old office. Don't be late. Her father's cold anger carried clearly through the line. This better be good. It's not. That's why we need to talk. Sophia spent the rest of the night preparing for war, organized Brandon's financial documents into devastating clarity, rehearsed her arguments for the board, drafted the engagement termination letter her lawyers would serve the next day. When she finally left the office at 3:00 in the morning, the city was dark, and snow had begun to fall again. The confrontation she'd set in motion would destroy her engagement, alienate her father, and potentially cost her everything she'd built. But as she drove through empty streets toward her cold penthouse, Sophia felt lighter than she had in years. Because for the first time since Ryan died, she was choosing something that mattered more than money or power or carefully managed appearances. She was choosing truth, even if it burned everything down. The next morning arrived with brutal clarity. Sophia dressed carefully in her sharpest suit, armor for the battle ahead. William was already waiting when she arrived at his old office on the 45th floor, the space he'd refused to fully vacate, even after retirement. This had better be worth dragging me out of Palm Springs. Her father looked older than she remembered, silver hair and deep lines that hadn't been as pronounced at Thanksgiving. What's so urgent it couldn't wait? Brandon Hayes has been embezzling from his firm for 18 months. Sophia laid out the evidence methodically, each document another nail in the coffin. He's using our merger to hide the theft. The wedding was never about partnership. It was about him gaining access to our accounts to cover $42 million in stolen funds. William studied the documents with the cold precision that had made him feared in business circles. His expression never changed, but Sophia saw the calculation in his eyes. This complicates things. Complicates? Sophia's voice rose despite her intention to stay calm. He's a criminal. He tried to blackmail me yesterday when I questioned the wedding timeline. Threatened to spin legitimate merger expenses as embezzlement on my part unless I went through with it. And you're telling me this because I'm calling off the engagement. Sophia met her father's eyes without flinching. The wedding's canceled. The merger's canceled. I'm turning Brandon's records over to the SEC and our lawyers. Let them sort out whether to prosecute. William's expression finally shifted. Cold fury replacing calculation. You're throwing away a $200 million deal because of wounded pride. I'm protecting this company from a con artist who would have destroyed us. Or you're protecting your new pet project. William's voice dripped contempt. The maintenance worker. Brandon told me you've been sneaking around with him. Is that what this is really about? You've decided to play savior to some failed musician, and you're using Brandon's poor judgment as an excuse? Sophia felt her control slip. His name is Ethan Cross. And yes, I care about him, but that has nothing to do with Brandon being a thief. Everything has to do with everything in business. You know that. I taught you that. William stood, pacing to the window. The Hayes merger was going to position us for international expansion. Open doors in markets we've been trying to crack for 5 years. And you're willing to sacrifice all of that for what? A janitor who plays pretty music? For integrity, for doing the right thing even when it costs us. Sophia's voice shook with suppressed rage. You want to talk about poor judgment? Let's talk about Bennett Productions. Let's talk about the cost-cutting that destroyed Ethan's career 12 years ago. The substandard equipment you approved that crushed his hand. The $75,000 settlement you paid to make him go away. William waved a dismissive hand. Ancient history. The boy was adequately compensated. He was a concert pianist with a $300,000 contract. You destroyed his future and paid him barely enough to cover medical bills. That's not compensation. That's covering your tracks. It was business, acceptable risk. These things happen. William's indifference was absolute. If he'd had real talent, he would have found another way. The fact that he's cleaning toilets now proves I was right to cut losses. Sophia felt something inside her break cleanly, like a frozen branch finally snapping under too much weight. You taught me that power means never apologizing, never showing weakness, never letting anyone in. But you know what real power is, Father? It's having the courage to admit when you're wrong. It's choosing love even when it costs you everything. And it's standing up to the person who hurt you most, even when that person is family. William's face purpled. If you do this, you're no daughter of mine. The words that should have devastated her felt instead like liberation. Then I guess I've been an orphan for a long time. She left him standing in his old office, frozen with fury, and didn't look back. The board meeting was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. Sophia had until then to prepare for the fight of her professional life. But when she reached her own office, she found Brandon waiting. Brandon stood by her window, backlit by morning sun that made him look like a paper cutout of a man. 2 lawyers flanked him. Expensive suits, leather briefcases, the kind of legal muscle that cost $500 per hour minimum. You didn't think I'd come alone, did you? Brandon's voice carried a confidence that didn't match the nervous energy radiating from his posture. After our conversation yesterday, I realized we needed witnesses for what comes next. Sophia set her bag down carefully, buying time to assess the room. James Carter appeared in her doorway, hand on his radio, clearly alerted by building security that unauthorized personnel had entered the executive suite. It's fine, James. Give us the room. The security chief hesitated, his Marine training evident in the way he evaluated threat levels with a single sweep of his eyes. Boss, you sure? I'm sure, but stay close. James withdrew, leaving the door cracked. Sophia heard his footsteps stop just outside, a presence she found oddly comforting. Brandon gestured to his lawyers. These gentlemen represent Hayes Investment Partners and our consortium of investors. They're here to ensure that the merger proceeds as planned and that certain irregularities don't derail months of careful preparation. The taller lawyer stepped forward, opening his briefcase to extract a folder. Miss Bennett, We've been retained to address concerns about the stability of Bennett Capital's leadership. Recent behavioral patterns suggest decision-making compromised by inappropriate personal attachments that could jeopardize shareholder value. Sophia felt cold fury crystallize in her chest. This was an ambush, carefully orchestrated. Brandon had anticipated her discovery of his fraud and prepared a preemptive strike. Let me save us all some time. Sophia moved to her desk, pulled out the flash drive Michelle had prepared, and connected it to her computer. The conference room screen flickered to life with spreadsheets, wire transfers, shell company registrations. This is Brandon Hayes's financial activity over the past 18 months. $42 million embezzled from his own firm and hidden through offshore accounts. The merger he's pushing so aggressively isn't about business synergy. It's about gaining access to my company's funds to cover his theft. The lawyers exchanged glances. Brandon's face went white, then red. That's a lie. His voice cracked on the word. Those are legitimate consulting fees and international investment vehicles. You're manufacturing evidence to avoid a wedding you're too cowardly to simply call off. I have emails. Sophia clicked through documents. Communications between you and your offshore accountants discussing how to disguise fund transfers. Spreadsheets showing your firm's real asset values versus what you reported to investors. Bank statements from shell companies that exist only on paper. The shorter lawyer moved closer to examine the screen. Mr. Hayes, are these documents authentic? Brandon's jaw worked silently. Then desperation replaced calculation. Even if they are, you've already committed to this merger. The board approved it. Your father endorsed it. Breaking the engagement now would tank our stock prices and expose Bennett Capital to lawsuits from my investors who've already positioned themselves around this deal. Then they can sue. Sophia's voice cut like glass. Because I'm not marrying a criminal to save face. You're not breaking this engagement because of my finances. Brandon's control finally snapped. You're doing it because you've developed feelings for that pathetic janitor. The one who's been playing piano in your lobby like some broken music box you can't resist winding up. His name is Ethan Cross. And yes, I care about him, but that's irrelevant to your embezzlement. It's completely relevant. Brandon moved closer, his expensive cologne failing to mask the scent of desperation. You're making emotional decisions that will destroy this company, throwing away a strategic partnership because some blue-collar worker played you a pretty song. Do you have any idea how weak that makes you look? Sophia met his eyes without flinching. Weak is stealing from your own investors. Weak is trying to blackmail your way into a marriage. Weak is standing in my office with hired lawyers hoping to intimidate me into covering for your crimes. The taller lawyer intervened. Perhaps we should table this discussion until cooler heads can prevail. Mr. Hayes, I think we need to consult privately before proceeding. But Brandon wasn't listening. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. If you won't see reason, maybe public pressure will help. What are you doing? Sending these photos to the business press. You and Ethan Cross having intimate conversations in your lobby. Late-night meetings. Very cozy for a CEO and her maintenance staff. Let's see how the board reacts when they find out their leader is compromising company integrity for a relationship that violates every professional boundary in the book. James Carter materialized in the doorway. Boss, you want me to escort these gentlemen out? But before Sophia could answer, her phone lit up with an incoming call, William Bennett. She answered on speaker. Sophia, what the hell did you do? Her father's voice carried the cold rage of a man whose control was slipping. Brandon just sent me photos of you with that maintenance worker. Intimate photos. He's threatening to leak them unless you honor the merger terms. I'm aware. And I don't care if he leaks them. The engagement is over. The merger is canceled. Brandon is a thief, and I'm turning evidence of his fraud over to the SEC. William's pause lasted 3 beats too long. "You will do no such thing." "Excuse me?" "The Hayes merger is too important to abandon over some financial irregularities that can be quietly resolved." William's voice took on the tone he'd used when she was young and had disappointed him. "You will marry Brandon as planned. You will complete the merger, and you will stop this ridiculous infatuation with the help before it destroys everything I built." Sophia felt the last thread of filial obligation snap. "Everything you built was constructed on the bodies of people you crushed, like Ethan Cross, like every other person who got in the way of your profit margins." The cross boy again. William's contempt carried clearly through the speaker. He was mediocre, collateral damage, acceptable loss. If you can't understand that, you're not fit to run this company. "Then I guess we're about to find out, because the board meets in 3 hours and I'm putting this to a vote. Either they support me ending a fraudulent merger with a criminal, or they can find a new CEO." She hung up before her father could respond. Brandon's face had gone from red to gray, the reality of his situation finally penetrating his desperate bravado. "You've just destroyed both our careers." His voice came out hollow. "When this goes public, when investors see Bennett Capital's CEO breaking a major merger for personal reasons, your stock will crater. My firm will collapse. Everyone loses. Everyone except the people you stole from." Sophia gathered the evidence files. "James, please escort Mr. Hayes and his attorneys out of the building. If they resist, call the police." "This isn't over." Brandon's final attempt at threat fell flat. "I have connections, resources. You can't just... It's already over. You just haven't accepted it yet." James Carter and his security team guided the 3 men toward the elevators. Sophia watched them go, feeling the weight of what she'd set in motion settle onto her shoulders. Then she called Michelle. "I need you to set up an emergency board meeting. 2 p.m., full attendance required. And I need you to contact our corporate attorneys. Tell them to prepare a complete separation agreement from Hayes Investment Partners and documentation for filing with the SEC." Michelle appeared in person rather than responding over the phone. "Boss, are you sure about this? Going to war with Brandon and your father simultaneously?" "I'm sure." Sophia pulled up her presentation files. "Because if I don't do this now, I never will, and I'd rather lose everything fighting for something that matters than keep it all by compromising everything I claim to value." The assistant smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Then, let's burn it down properly." The hours before the board meeting blurred together. Lawyers arrived with documents. Michelle coordinated communications. James Carter quietly gathered security footage of Brandon accessing financial systems he shouldn't have been able to reach, adding theft of proprietary information to the list of charges. At 1 p.m., Ethan called. "Sophia, what's happening? Michelle said there's an emergency board meeting about Brandon. Are you okay?" "I will be, one way or another." Sophia pressed her palm against the cold window glass. "I just needed to hear your voice before I walk into that room." "Do you want me there?" "No. This is something I have to do alone. But Ethan, when this is over, whatever happens, I need you to know that choosing to tell the truth about Brandon isn't about you. It's about me. About finally becoming the person I should have been all along instead of the one my father trained me to be." Ethan's response came quiet but firm. "I know. And whatever happens in that meeting, you're not alone. Lily and I will be here when you're done." The board assembled in the main conference room at precisely 2 p.m., 12 members total, 7 men, 5 women, ranging in age from 48 to 73. Old money and new, tech fortunes and real estate dynasties, all united by the common goal of maximizing returns on their Bennett Capital investments. William sat at the far end of the table, his presence a violation of the retirement agreement, but one no one dared challenge. He'd built this company from nothing, and his force of personality still commanded the room, even without official authority. Sophia stood at the head of the table, presentation remote in hand. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I'm calling this meeting to address critical information that's come to light regarding the Hayes Investment Partners merger and my engagement to Brandon Hayes. She clicked through the evidence methodically. Financial statements, wire transfers, email chains, shell company structures. Each slide built an incontrovertible case of systematic fraud stretching back 18 months. Brandon Hayes has been embezzling from his firm and using our merger as cover to hide the theft. The relationship I've been pursuing with him was based on false pretenses. He chose Bennett Capital specifically because he believed he could manipulate me into providing access to our accounts before his fraud was discovered. The board members exchanged glances, some shocked, others calculating. Elizabeth Wong, the oldest member and a contemporary of Williams, spoke first. These are serious allegations, Sophia. Have you verified this information independently? Our forensic accountants have spent the last 12 hours confirming every transaction. Sophia gestured to the lawyers seated along the wall. We're prepared to file a complete report with the SEC and cooperate fully with their investigation. But I wanted the board to understand why I'm terminating both the engagement and the merger before news breaks publicly. David Mitchell, a hedge fund manager who joined the board 3 years prior, leaned forward. This puts us in a difficult position. We've already committed significant resources to integration planning. Our stock price has risen in anticipation of the merger benefits. Backing out now will raise questions about our due diligence and leadership judgment. William seized the opening. My daughter's personal feelings are clouding her business judgment. Yes, Brandon made some questionable financial decisions, but they can be addressed quietly through settlement. Walking away from a $200 million deal because of cold feet about marriage is the real scandal here. This isn't about cold feet. Sophia felt her composure crack slightly. This is about protecting Bennett Capital from a con artist who saw us as his escape route from prison. Or it's about protecting your new relationship. William's voice dripped acid. Let's address the elephant in the room. You've been conducting an inappropriate relationship with a maintenance worker. Someone showed them the photos Brandon provided. Elizabeth Wong reluctantly pulled up images on her tablet. Security footage of Sophia and Ethan talking by the piano, sitting together in the empty lobby. Nothing inappropriate by any reasonable standard, but framed through a certain lens, they suggested impropriety. This man is Ethan Cross. William stood, commanding attention through sheer force of presence. 12 years ago, he tried to sue Bennett Productions for injuries sustained due to his own negligence. We settled generously and he disappeared. Now he's resurfaced, worked his way into my daughter's building, and manipulated her into this situation. She's not ending the merger because of Brandon's finances. She's ending it because she's been compromised by a con artist playing on her emotions. That's a lie. Sophia's voice rang clear and cold. Ethan didn't manipulate anyone. He took a maintenance job 3 years ago because he needed health insurance after his wife died. He had no idea I was connected to Bennett Productions until after he was hired. And yes, I care about him, but that has nothing to do with Brandon's embezzlement. Everything has to do with everything. William moved around the table, a predator closing in. You want to know why Ethan Cross is really here? Why a failed pianist with a crushed hand suddenly reappears in your life right when you're about to complete the most important merger of your career? Because he sees an opportunity. A lonely CEO with too much money and too few emotional attachments. He played you a song, told you a sad story, and now you're willing to destroy everything to play savior. Ethan Cross wrote Starlit Promise. Sophia's words fell into shocked silence. The song my first love supposedly composed for me before he died. Ryan Mitchell started it but couldn't finish it. Ethan completed it without taking credit because he loved me from a distance and wanted me to have something beautiful, even if I never knew it came from him. That was 16 years ago, before he had any idea who I'd become or what I'd inherit. William's expression flickered. 1-10-25. The first crack in his armor. That's impossible. Dr. Robert Hayes confirmed it. Sophia pulled up documentation from the music professor, composition journals from that summer, student records. Ethan Cross was there. He wrote that song. And 12 years ago, your cost-cutting at Bennett Productions destroyed his career when substandard equipment you personally approved crushed his hand. We paid him $75,000 to cover $68,000 in medical bills and called it square. You ruined his life for a $300,000 contract and a quarterly profit margin. The board members shifted uncomfortably. This was no longer about a broken engagement. This was about corporate malfeasance, buried liabilities, and the moral foundation of a company they trusted with billions. Ancient history. William's voice hardened. Not relevant to today's decision. It's completely relevant. Sophia faced her father across the conference table. Because it demonstrates a pattern. You've built this empire by crushing anyone who got in the way and paying just enough to avoid consequences. Brandon learned from the best. He thought he could do the same thing. Use our resources to cover his crimes. Pay off anyone who noticed. Maintain the facade until it was too late to stop him. Elizabeth Wong cleared her throat. Sophia, I appreciate your honesty, but your father raises a valid concern. Setting aside the emotional aspects, how do we know your judgment isn't compromised? You're asking us to trust that your relationship with Mr. Cross isn't influencing this decision. Because I'm bringing you evidence. Sophia's voice steadied. Not feelings, not personal vendetta. Financial records that any forensic accountant would recognize as fraud. If I were acting on emotion, I'd have quietly canceled the wedding and buried Brandon's crimes to avoid scandal. Instead, I'm exposing everything and accepting whatever consequences follow. That's not compromised judgment. That's integrity. Integrity doesn't pay dividends. William's final card played. And sentimentality doesn't build empires. You can choose to be the kind of leader who lets emotions drive decisions. Or you can be the kind who does what's necessary regardless of personal cost. I know which one I raised you to be. Sophia met her father's eyes and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. A man so committed to power that he'd sacrificed every meaningful relationship on its altar. A man who measured worth in quarterly returns and viewed human collateral as acceptable loss. A man who would never understand that real strength meant choosing truth, even when it cost everything. You didn't raise me. You trained me like you'd train a weapon or a tool. But weapons can think for themselves, Father. And this one is done being wielded. The vote took 30 minutes of private deliberation. Sophia waited in her office, watching snow begin to fall again outside her window. The city looked clean under the fresh white, all the grime and ugliness temporarily hidden. Michelle brought her coffee she didn't drink and updates she barely heard. When the call came to return to the conference room, Sophia walked in with her spine straight and her head high, prepared to lose everything she'd built. Elizabeth Wong delivered the verdict. The board votes 7-5 to support your decision to terminate the Hayes merger and report Brandon Hayes' activities to appropriate authorities. We affirm your position as CEO and authorize you to take whatever actions necessary to protect Bennett Capital's interests and reputation. Sophia's knees weakened with relief she didn't let show. Thank you. However, Elizabeth's tone remained firm. We're requiring enhanced financial oversight for the next 18 months, monthly audits, outside consultants, complete transparency, and we expect full documentation regarding your relationship with Mr. Cross to ensure no impropriety exists. This company cannot afford even the appearance of compromised leadership. Understood. Sophia accepted the terms without argument. They were fair given the circumstances. William stood abruptly, his chair scraping against expensive flooring. This is a mistake. When the stock price tanks and investors flee, don't come crying to me to fix it. You are welcome to your opinion, but the decision is made. Her father walked out without another word. 2 board members who'd voted against her followed. Allies lost, but fewer than she'd feared. The remaining members dispersed with varying degrees of support, some offering quiet words of encouragement, others maintaining professional distance. When the room finally emptied, Sophia sat in William's old chair and let herself shake. James Carter found her there 10 minutes later. "Boss, we've got Brandon Hayes in custody downstairs. FBI showed up with a warrant based on the evidence you provided. Turns out the SEC had been investigating his firm for months. Your documentation gave them everything they needed." "Good." Sophia's voice came out hollow. "That's good. There's someone else here to see you." Ethan stood in her office doorway, Lily holding his hand. The girl broke free and ran to Sophia, wrapping small arms around her waist. "You did it! Michelle told us! You won!" Sophia hugged Lily back, feeling tears threaten for the first time all day. "I did. It's over." Ethan crossed the room and pulled both of them into his embrace. His scarred hands settled on Sophia's shoulders, solid and real. "I'm proud of you. I lost my father," Sophia's voice muffled against his chest. "Maybe permanently this time." "You found yourself. That's worth the trade." They stood like that for a long moment, an unlikely family forged from loss and second chances and the courage to tell truth even when it cost everything. Lily eventually pulled back, her young face serious. "Does this mean Daddy can stop hiding that he loves you?" "Because he does. He told me when he thought I was asleep." Ethan's face flushed. "Lily, we talked about private conversations." "But it's true." The girl's logic was irrefutable. "And Miss Sophia loves you too. I can tell because she gets the same look Mommy used to get when she looked at you. Happy and sad at the same time." Sophia laughed through tears. "Out of the mouths of babes." The months that followed were not easy. News of Brandon's arrest and the broken merger sent Bennett Capital stock into temporary freefall. Investors demanded explanations. The business press speculated about Sophia's fitness for leadership. William gave interviews from Palm Springs painting his daughter as emotionally unstable, though most reporters saw through the bitter father's agenda. But slowly, steadily, the company recovered. Sophia implemented the transparency measures the board required and went further, establishing an ethics committee, creating whistleblower protections, auditing every subsidiary for the kind of corner cutting that had destroyed Ethan's career. Bennett Capital emerged leaner but stronger, with a reputation for integrity that attracted investors tired of corporate malfeasance. Ethan returned to music gradually, carefully. He started teaching at the community center Sophia had quietly upgraded with new instruments and soundproofing. Lily thrived in his classes, her natural talent emerging under her father's patient guidance. Other children from low-income families joined, kids who'd never had access to quality music education before. In April, Dr. Robert Hayes visited with unexpected news. "There's a new microsurgical technique being pioneered at Johns Hopkins, nerve reconstruction for old crush injuries. They've had promising results with patients who were told their damage was permanent." Ethan sat in Sophia's office. Their evening conversations had become routine, accepted by employees who'd learned their CEO's personal life was off limits for gossip, and shook his head. "I've made peace with what I lost, Dr. Hayes. I don't need to get it back." "But what if you could?" Sophia leaned forward. "Not all of it, but enough to perform again. Enough to show Lily what you were before the accident. I show her every day through how I live, how I treat people, how I never let bitterness poison what's good. That's more valuable than perfect technique." Dr. Hayes pulled out research papers. The surgery's experimental but covered under Bennett Capital's health plan as innovative treatment. Recovery would be 4 to 6 months. Success rate is around 70% for meaningful improvement. Lily settled into Sophia's lap. She claimed that privilege weeks ago and looked up at her father. I want to hear you play the way Grandma's videos show before the accident, when your hands could do anything. Ethan's resistance crumbled under his daughter's earnest gaze. If I try this and it fails, if my hand ends up worse than it is now, then we'll deal with it together. Sophia's certainty was absolute. But if you don't try, you'll always wonder. The surgery happened in July. 8 hours of microsurgical reconstruction that left Ethan unconscious for a day and in pain for weeks after. Sophia took leave from the office to be there, fielding board calls from the hospital waiting room, while Lily colored pictures to hang in her father's recovery room. Dr. Hayes consulted on the procedure, his professional pride invested in proving the technique worked. When the head surgeon finally emerged with cautious optimism, Sophia felt a hope she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. We rebuilt the neural connections and repaired scar tissue that was impeding function. Now it's up to time and physical therapy. Give it 6 months before we assess final results. Ethan's recovery was brutal. 5 hours daily of physical therapy, exercises that left him sweating and swearing and questioning why he'd agreed to this. Sophia witnessed his frustration during evening visits. The way he'd stare at his hand like it was a stranger's, willing it to bend in ways it had forgotten. Lily practiced piano in his presence, her small fingers working through scales and simple melodies. Sometimes Ethan would reach out with his damaged hand, trying to mirror her movements, failing more often than succeeding. But gradually, incrementally, function returned. By September, he could play simple pieces again. By October, he was performing intermediate compositions with only occasional cramping. The hand would never be perfect, would never have the complete fluidity it once possessed. But it was functional enough to teach, to demonstrate, to create music that mattered. In November, Dr. Hayes proposed something audacious. There's a benefit concert for the music scholarship program we've established in Ryan Mitchell and Ethan Cross's names. December 22nd. I think you should perform. Ethan's immediate reaction was terror. I'm not ready. What if I fail publicly? What if my hand cramps mid-performance and everyone sees? You're always telling me it's okay to make mistakes when I practice. Lily's logic cut through his fear. Why is it different for you? Sophia added her voice. You taught me that being brave means doing what's right even when you're scared. Now let me teach you it's okay to try and fall short. The courage is in the attempt, not the perfection. Ethan agreed, though his anxiety built with each passing week. They scheduled 3 pieces: Starlit Promise, a Chopin nocturne, and something new. Ethan had been composing in stolen hours between teaching and therapy. He called it second movement, explaining to Sophia late one night that every great piece of music has more than one part, and their story was just beginning. The Bennett Tower Ballroom filled to capacity on December 22nd. 500 guests, donors, media representatives, students from the scholarship program wearing their best clothes and carrying nervous energy. The event had attracted attention beyond their expectations. The story of the janitor turned composer, the CEO who chose integrity over profit, the romance that nearly destroyed an empire but rebuilt it stronger. Backstage, Ethan paced in his black suit, the first time Sophia had seen him in formal wear outside her fantasies. Lily sat beside Sophia's chair, resplendent in a deep blue dress she'd picked herself, swinging her legs and humming. Daddy looks scared, the girl observed with characteristic directness. Is he going to be okay? He's going to be brave. Sophia smoothed Lily's curls. That's different from okay, but sometimes it's better. When the lights dimmed and the audience quieted, Ethan walked on stage with Lily's hand in his. The applause was immediate and thunderous. He settled at the grand piano while Lily perched on a small bench beside him, exactly as they'd practiced. Ethan's fingers found the keys. The opening notes of Starlit Promise filled the ballroom with crystalline clarity. This was the piece that had started everything. The song he'd written for an 18-year-old girl he loved from afar, completed what a dying boy had started, given away without claiming credit. Now he played it publicly for the first time, every note carrying 16 years of patience and pain and impossible hope. Midway through, his hand cramped. Sophia saw him wince, fingers stuttering over keys. The audience probably didn't notice, but she knew his tells, recognized the instant of panic that crossed his face. Lily reached over and touched his shoulder. Just a light pressure, solidarity without words. Ethan pushed through, compensating with his left hand, simplifying passages his right couldn't handle, transforming technical limitations into emotional interpretation. The final notes hung in the air like prayers. The audience erupted with standing ovation that went on so long Sophia feared they'd never let him continue. But Ethan raised his hand for silence and spoke into the microphone for the first time. "This final piece is new. I call it second movement because every great piece of music has more than one part. And this, all of this, is just our beginning. It's about second chances, about broken things made beautiful, about love that waits patiently until it's called into the light." He began to play, and Sophia understood why he'd kept the composition secret until now. The melody built from Starlit Promise's themes but transformed them. Where the original spoke of yearning and distance, this new piece spoke of connection and courage. Where the original was lonely, this was communal. Where the original grieved, this celebrated. Lily joined him for the final phrases, her small hands picking out a simple counter-melody he'd taught her. Father and daughter, creating something together, imperfect and honest and achingly human. When the music ended, Ethan stood with Lily in his arms and found Sophia in the crowd. She made her way to the stage through applause that felt less like appreciation and more like witness to something sacred. Ethan took her hand, Lily hugged them both, and a photographer captured the moment. Not CEO and employee, not rich woman and poor man, but three people who'd chosen each other against every reasonable objection. Dr. Hayes watched from the audience, tears streaming down his weathered face. He'd taught thousands of students over 4 decades, watched brilliance bloom and wither, seen careers flourish and fail. But this, watching a broken man reclaim his voice through love and a frozen woman thaw through courage, this was the masterpiece. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes not from perfect execution, but from broken people brave enough to play. Anyway, 6 months later, on a Sunday afternoon when cherry blossoms drifted through city parks like pink snow, Ethan and Sophia sat on a bench watching Lily chase butterflies through spring grass. The girl had grown taller, more confident, her music teacher reporting she had genuine talent if she wanted to pursue it. "I've been thinking about the song." Sophia leaned into Ethan's shoulder. "Starlit Promise. It has an ending now, but it still feels unfinished somehow, like it's still being written." Ethan laced his scarred fingers through hers. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe the best promises aren't the ones we make once and lock away. Maybe they're the ones we keep remaking every day in 1,000 small ways." Sophia turned to look at him. This man who'd loved her for 16 years without expectation, who'd sacrificed dreams to give her something beautiful, who'd chosen truth even when it cost him everything. "Then make me a promise. Not forever, not some grand declaration. Just promise me today that you'll keep playing, that you'll keep teaching Lily, that you'll keep showing me what it means to love something even when it's hard." "I promise." And he meant it. Lily ran back to them, breathless and grinning, a cherry blossom petal caught in her dark curls. "There's a piano player over by the fountain. He's pretty good, but not as good as you, Daddy. Come listen." Ethan stood, pulling Sophia to her feet. "Should we go see?" "Absolutely. But first—" Sophia rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and sure, tasting of coffee and promise. "What was that for?" "For writing me a song when you didn't have to. For being brave enough to show up even when you were scared. For teaching me that sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones everyone else overlooks." She squeezed his hand. "For being you." They walked toward the fountain, Lily skipping ahead, and Ethan thought about how 16 years ago he'd been a scared kid who poured his heart into 8 bars of music, never imagining where those notes would lead. To this moment, to her, to us, to a life I never dared to dream was possible. The pianist by the fountain was young, maybe 19, playing with more enthusiasm than polish. But there was something pure in his effort, something that reminded Ethan of who he used to be. When the boy finished his song and looked up nervously, expecting criticism, Ethan clapped. "That was beautiful. Keep playing even when it's hard. Even when people tell you you're not good enough. Even when your hands hurt and your heart is breaking, keep playing because the world needs your music, even if you think no one's listening." The young musician's face lit up with gratitude and relief. He launched into another piece, this one more confident. Ethan, Sophia, and Lily sat on the fountain's edge to listen, an unlikely family bound by love that had waited patiently for 16 years to be claimed. Above them, cherry blossoms fell like grace. In the distance, someone laughed. The city hummed its eternal symphony. Car horns and distant sirens and wind through new leaves. But here, in this pocket of spring afternoon, with music washing over them, Lily's hand in his and Sophia's head on his shoulder, Ethan felt the kind of peace that only comes from complete honesty. No secrets, no shadows, no ghosts of the past standing between them. Just 2 people who had found each other across years and loss and impossible odds. Who had chosen each other not because it was easy, but because some songs are too important not to sing. Ryan wrote the beginning, I wrote the middle, but the ending is still being written by all of us together. Sophia squeezed his hand, understanding what he meant without needing explanation. The song they were writing now had no score, no predetermined structure. It would be messy and imperfect, full of mistakes and revisions and passages that didn't quite work, but it would be theirs, authentic and earned and worth every note. When the young pianist finished, Lily applauded with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of childhood. Ethan stood, leaving a $20 bill in the boy's open guitar case, and the 3 of them walked back through the park toward home. Not the penthouse Sophia owned or the apartment Ethan rented, but something new they were building together. A space defined not by square footage or property value, but by the choice to show up every day and write the next measure. The world felt, for this one shining moment, exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not without pain or struggle or uncertainty about what came next, but real, honest, true. And in the end, Ethan thought, that was the only kind of music worth making. The kind that came from broken people brave enough to play anyway. The kind that transformed scars into strength and loneliness into love. The kind that proved even the most damaged hands could create something beautiful if given courage and time and someone willing to listen. Somewhere above them, clouds parted to let spring sun paint the city gold, and 3 voices hummed in harmony, writing their song, one measure at a time, knowing the ending was still ahead, but trusting the melody would carry them home.